We are all running a race where the finish line keeps moving, yet most of us stop dead in our tracks because we treat a single stumble like a life sentence. The human brain is a magnificent ancient survival machine, wired for one specific task: to keep us safe by avoiding discomfort, humiliation, and failure. Every single time you make a mistake, your biology flashes a warning sign, screaming at you to retreat, to protect yourself, and to stay hidden in the safety of mediocrity. And right there, in that exact split second of hesitation, your true potential evaporates. The tragic reality is that millions of brilliant minds are currently paralyzed not by a lack of talent, but by the way their brains process falling down. They see a pit, and they see a penalty. But the most unstoppable individuals on this planet don't possess superhuman intelligence. They have simply learned how to trick their own biology. They have engineered a mental framework that completely bypasses the brain's fear center. Time is ticking, and every moment you spend obsessing over the weight of your mistakes, you are reinforcing a prison of your own making. If you want to break free and unlock absolute momentum, you must fundamentally alter how your brain perceives the arena of trial and error. A man's brain is biologically wired to hyper-focus on the threat of public failure and the shame of falling. When he obsessively stares at the pit of defeat, his survival instinct forces him to freeze, paralyzing his ability to take necessary risks. He becomes entirely consumed by the penalty of the mistake rather than the potential of his mission. Unstoppable momentum occurs only when a man intentionally elevates his gaze past the immediate friction and anchors his mind on the ultimate prize. By deliberately tricking his focus to fixate on a deeply rooted purpose, the inevitable stumbles transform from punishing verdicts into simple, expected hurdles. A man often internalizes failure as a definitive judgment on his character and competence. When an endeavor collapses, his psychology tricks him into believing that he is flawed, rather than recognizing that the strategy itself simply failed. This emotional trap transforms a temporary roadblock into an identity crisis, causing him to abandon the pursuit entirely. Stripping the emotion from a mistake allows an unstoppable man to view every setback as an isolated data point. He detaches his personal worth from the immediate outcome, treating errors not as a penalty, but as essential feedback required to navigate the next attempt more intelligently. A man's primal instinct is hardwired to protect his status and avoid the vulnerability of defeat. When he views his life as a high-stakes battleground, where every error brings devastation, his brain treats mistakes as literal threats to survival. This defensive posture forces him to place small, prioritizing safety over growth. Overriding this ancient defense mechanism requires a profound shift in perspective. He must reframe the entire arena as a playground. When a man approaches challenges with the curiosity of a child playing a game, the fear of failure completely evaporates. He no longer sees a devastating penalty. He simply sees another attempt to solve the puzzle. A man traps himself in a cycle of stagnation when he demands that his first attempt be entirely flawless. He mistakenly believes that perfection is the prerequisite for progress, waiting for ideal conditions before moving forward. This unrealistic standard forces his brain into a state of chronic anxiety, viewing any potential flaw as a direct threat to his competence. True neurological momentum is triggered only by the willingness to iterate, not the achievement of perfection. Human biology inherently rewards active movement. Every time a man tests, adjusts, and takes another step, his brain releases the exact chemistry required to sustain his drive. A man becomes deeply fragile when his entire motivation is tied strictly to the external rewards of the marketplace. When he only works for the trophy, every mistake feels like a devastating loss of status, triggering his brain's defense mechanisms to retreat. This transactional relationship with his work breeds a paralyzing fear of failure that keeps him safe but stagnant. Disarming this psychological trap requires a man to anchor his daily effort in the intrinsic value of the craft itself. When the act of building or solving becomes his primary reward, the fear of an imperfect outcome loses its power. By prioritizing the process over validation, he tricks his mind into unstoppable execution. A man's failure is rarely a failure of his true intent. It is almost always a structural failure of the system he has built around himself. When a man creates an environment where mistakes are treated as catastrophic emergencies, his brain will naturally default to absolute self-preservation. He accidentally structures a fragile binary framework where he is either entirely flawless or completely defeated, leaving no room for the natural friction of human learning. This unforgiving psychological architecture forces him to play small, hide his shortcomings, and ultimately suppress his own innate drive. His biology desperately craves a predictable structure where he can safely test his limits without fearing that a single misstep will destroy his long-term stability or his worth. True, unstoppable performance emerges only when a man intentionally engineers an operational ecosystem that treats stumbling as an expected cost of doing business. When he shifts his focus from managing emotional crises to executing a deliberate process, his brain completely stops registering errors as existential threats to his survival. He begins to view a mistake not as a personal indictment, but as a standard transaction, the necessary price of admission for gaining high-level mastery. By designing a daily routine that actively expects, absorbs, and metabolizes friction, he removes the heavy, paralyzing emotional weight that keeps ordinary men stuck. This structural shift fundamentally rewires his internal psychology, transforming the inevitable stumbles of the arena into the raw, practical fuel that accelerates his momentum toward winning.